Welcome to the Winning in Overtime series on the Growing Older with Enthusiasm podcast. I'm Dr. Ron Kaiser, and my co-host is Neil Haley. And Neil, hope you're having a good day. Ready to talk about social connectedness today.
Well, I think it's such an important thing in overtime that you continue to have social connectedness when we talk about the power of the brain, which we've discussed on multiple podcasts. And social connectedness is something that sometimes we didn't even do a good job before overtime.
Yeah, it's kind of very difficult for some people to recognize how important social connectedness is to your brain, to your body's health, to your overall longevity. People are surprised to learn a couple of things. One is that, particularly in the older age ranges, loneliness is a killer, that there are things that you enhance in terms of your ability to function, your ability to live longer, just by maintaining social connections. And some research has indicated that it can add double digits onto your life, 10 years or more, to be able to have high quality friendships. The longest running study, longitudinal study of people who successfully age, the Harvard study, has demonstrated that having high quality friendships and social connections is the single most important thing in terms of prolonging life. So it's not just a nice thing to have friends, and it's not just, well, I'm not that social, so I don't, I don't have to, and stuff like that. But it's really important if you value your health and your longevity.
100%. That's such a great point. But sometimes people don't know what social connectiveness looks like in older age, especially with COVID. And there's still people getting COVID, and it's not best for the older population. So, that's the thing. How do I develop social connectiveness, especially if I'm still in my home? Some people are living in their home or apartment. They're not in assisted living. They're not in even a retirement community. They're still in their home. How do you kind of maintain that social connectedness?
Well, first of all, I think it's great if they're still able to function in their home. So the important thing is to take advantage of the fact that you've got a lot going for you. I mean, I know I live uh, in an apartment. It's one that's in a regular apartment building, lots of other people in here. You can if you're in an apartment or even if you're in your own detached house, it's very easy to do nothing about it and you've got all your needs met. Again, if you're able to live alone, you can probably do your own shopping. You can probably do a lot of things that help you to function independently. But that's not the goal. The goal is to function independently with the highest quality of life as possible. And I think uh, let's let's consider that a bonus if we can live on our own. Now, I do think there have been some counter trends to it. I think number one, COVID did a whole lot to kind of institutionalize or make it comfortable to say, the fewer social connections I have, the better off I am. That if I stay home, I'm not going to get COVID from somebody else. Uh, and some people have had 2 or 3 years of really kind of isolating themselves or semi-isolating themselves and feeling that they're functioning pretty well because of this. So that's been one of the issues. The other is technology, what we're doing right now. I mean, you don't need other people to listen to this podcast. You can do it on your own, uh, and it's enticing to do that. When you add to that the fact that some people are characterologically kind of, I hate to use the word loners. I don't think that's necessarily an appropriate term, but they're used to functioning on their own. Their work isn't one where you have a lot of meetings or uh, things of that nature. That it's kind of common sometimes to say, well, I'm not a people person. I'm a thing person. Uh, the fact is that all that stuff may be legitimate in its place, but it has to be combined with interactions with others in order to maximize your potential and your chances for living a longer and healthier life.
Most definitely. So what tips would you say? Like, let's just talk about anyone listening to this broadcast to improve their social connectedness. Because honestly, there are people in their 40s not maintaining social connectedness, 30s. I think I'm more maintaining my social connections now at 51 than I did in my, mid 20s, after getting married and really just being stuck in the rut of job and different things. But kind of give some examples.
Yeah, that's a really good point that just like so many other things, what you establish in your 20s and 30s uh, really becomes a pattern that gets harder to get out of. So I always encourage people to start growing old early, to do the kinds of things that will be helpful to you when you're older. So I think the first thing for those listeners who are uh, in their first half century of life, the important thing is to recognize we're talking to you too, not just the older adults, that it's important to kind of maintain those connections. And what I encourage people to do is to start out at your own comfort level. While staying connected electronically is not the same thing as person-to-person interactions. It's a whole lot better than having no interactions. We found that out during COVID when uh, the number of people who are connecting over Zoom and having family meetings and sharing dinners over Zoom, really exploded. So, don't dismiss that. Again, it's not as good, but it's a step in the right direction. So maintaining your contacts by phone, by computer, so on is an important kind of thing. I also am a believer that pets can be a part of your social connection strategy. Again, not the same thing as a human, but it gets you involved with another being that you can provide for, another being that's usually happy to see you. And again, it's a pet is somebody that you can or some being that you can interact with. Uh, don't think that only in rare occasions would I consider a goldfish the kind of pet that helps in this regard, but certainly a dog or cat uh, can be a real step in the direction of social connections. The third tip is for most people, we grew up in a society where we had friends. Now, sometimes things interfere with it. I know in the midst of the busiest times in my career, I could have enough to do without interacting with anybody outside of my family, between my work and between raising kids and so on. But I'm connected with a lot of people who were friends before I got into that mode. And for some of them, I was disconnected with them or from them for a period of time. So reach out to them. There's research to indicate that people who have reconnected with friends have been surprised at how welcome those interactions were. And I think it's particularly important uh, and to recognize this with people who may not be working at this point, may not have a whole balanced kind of life, and may welcome the social connections. So that's an important thing. And then if you have difficulty in kind of knowing how to get involved in human to human interactions, I am a big believer in volunteering. Volunteering is number one, you're serving society. People don't employ or use volunteers unless there's a need for them. So you definitely are fulfilling a need. You're interacting with people in a way that's different than having to worry about, well, meeting somebody in a bar or, going to an event where you don't know anybody and the event is involves listening to a speaker or whatever it may be. Now, there are things that you can do to get more involved in those regards. But if you're volunteering for a cause, you're doing it around a particular area, so it doesn't require such social skills to do the interaction. Uh, you can get some of the same things by taking a class that's small enough so that you get to know your classmates, so on. So I really encourage people to look for structured ways of interacting because, again, overlaying it all is the job is to live as long and healthy and positive a life as possible. And so this stuff isn't just nice, but it's stuff that really contributes to your overall health. And I think we've got to consider that whenever we think about social connectedness.
See, sometimes we look at our, our relationship with our significant other, we might not be having the right social connectiveness with that person. Because if you can rekindle the love or fall in love again, it is such a great thing for the human body. As a psychologist, can you explain that a little bit, Dr. Ron? Because that's the other thing is once you retire, you're with that significant other that you might only see a portion of your life for 50 years, right? Or depending on how long you've been with that person. But that is an important social interaction. If there's no social interaction with that significant other, they're around and you both are in overtime. Oh boy, that's not going to be a fun mix.
Yeah, that I hadn't even thought of that, but I thought of the subject, but I hadn't thought that I actually have a paper on that's available to people from my website. It's called something like "We're Together All the Time. Now What?" Um, to kind of guide in this direction. I think one of the saddest things for me is when I will sometimes be in a restaurant and look at a couple, oftentimes an older couple, but it doesn't have to be, who will come in, sit down, uh, order from the menu, and that's about the only thing that they say to anybody during that time. And I have to assume that that's not an isolated event for them, that that's the way that they interact. And, I think while it's not unusual that the amount of passion goes down over time, with your significant other or spouse, uh, the reality is that you got together to share things, to share a life. And what it generally means to me when I see that is that there's been a transition to a time period that you almost weren't prepared for. It's kind of like, reaching over time and suddenly recognizing that, hey, I'm retired. What am I supposed to do all day? The,
Now,
the
and
reality is it's a separate phase of life that we can look forward to positively and prepare for it.
in many ways, second act, as you did, Dr. Ron, with your second act with your business, and now I guess a third act in the way of being a in the C-suite in your 80s, which is an unbelievable accomplishment. But think of the social interactions you have every day, because if we're not interacting with people, and I see this the days that I don't, I'm basically working the entire day on things and not doing podcasts. And I think even a podcast versus a coaching call, you feel a different feeling of social interaction in it. So you and I right now, I'm not getting that emotional connection as much as once we were on our coaching call before this interview. So let's kind of go into anything else. So it's what I kind of to summarize for our is you need to you got to make sure that you are interacting with people, family members, significant others on a regular basis. You got to reach out to friends, and it doesn't have to be always physically. It could be on a phone call, and and a connectedness with animals. Anything else that you can offer our audience today?
No, I just think that it's important to, and I know I've mentioned this before, to recognize that it's not just nice to say that you're socially connected, but it's really necessary for health and longevity. And I think as a society, we've become much more accepting of the fact that uh, we can, say, swallow a pill that goes to our stomach and our head might feel better. But we don't totally acknowledge the fact that if we interact well with others, that we actually can live longer. And I think that it's important to, recognize that if you care about the quality of life, and for many people that may mean decades beyond retirement, that it's really, really important to stay socially connected. You want to be as independent as possible, being able to make whatever choices you can relative to the living situation and so on. I just think it's a very, very important kind of thing. And if people have difficulties with it, then I hope they'll be in touch with me, because certainly my winning in overtime type of coaching includes social connectedness as one of the non-negotiable for activities that help us to become better versions of ourselves throughout the lifespan.
All right. Well, again, best place to go is to your website, to the mental health gym. Just search Dr. Ron Kaiser. He's everywhere. And I appreciate it, Dr. Ron. And I mean, just looking at social connectedness, it's interesting to see that most happy people are not isolated in one place. They're constantly interacting with people. Thank goodness for technology. But imagine the person that's from sun up to sundown, not interacting with people, how that makes them feel and how they really are not doing good things for their health and why they have a lot of health problems because of that. And I remember
Yeah.
that in COVID where I'd work all night on different projects and sleep hardly at all. And it really had some adverse effects on my body at a younger
Yeah,
age.
it's not magic. If you do the right things, you're better off for it. And social connectedness is one of the really right things you can do for yourself.
All right, that was Growing Older with Enthusiasm, guys. Take care.